Welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's really an honor and a privilege to have all of you here, and we're thrilled for this evening. I can't thank you all enough for joining us. It's been quite a journey just to be able to present a new artist here at LA Louver. We've had a long history, and we've had a lot of fun putting this together with JOJO Abbott. From the very beginning, she wanted to do this talk with a group of people that were important to her, and it has emerged in a rather, I guess, its own way, as all these things normally do. The title of the group discussion, really amongst them, which will be led by JOJO Abbott, Weaving Sacred Futures, is meant to explore the role of the creative leaders and world builders in creating spaces for free thought, limitless expression, and communal solidarity. Lord knows we need that. This discussion will delve into the potential we have to serve as vessels who channel consciously from the inner-outer spirit realm for the birthing of harmonious and life-affirming futures. It invites us to imagine intuitive and divine feminine-centered systems as foundational elements for sustainable world building. We need that too. And here we all are, really in support of that. Thank you for being here. JOJO Abbott is an interdisciplinary artist and performer who draws her heritage as a woman from West Africa and nomadic experiences across Ghana. She's been included in exhibitions really all over the world: Copenhagen, US, South Africa, Kenya. She was included in the show Alison Saar, curated in 2021, Seen Unseen. That's how we all met together. And she's done a lot of work both in the development of an important opera she's in the midst of, A God of Her Own Making, and has had collaborations with MoMA, the Brooklyn Museum, the Ghana Pavilion at the Venice Biennale, many, many others. She's toured as a singer with Lauryn Hill and played stages with Afropunk, Roots Picnic, Radio City Moody Hall, Esperanza Spalding, the Apollo Theater, Kennedy Center, goes on and on. We really can barely keep up with her. It really is amazing. Alison Saar, amongst us all, needs no real introduction. Right there, thank you. We're having a wonderful time right now with a multitude of public projects that are in the works here in Los Angeles with Destination Crenshaw, SoFi Stadium, coming up with the Joslin Museum, with EJI in Montgomery, Alabama getting installed later this year, and an international one not yet announced that you'll all be blown away by. Her work's in the Whitney, the Metropolitan, the Smithsonian and Museum of American Art. She's had hundreds of exhibitions, 9 solo exhibitions so far with LA Louver, and commissions really all over the world. It really is a distinguished pleasure also to be able to include Patrisse Cullors, who's had a monumental effect on everyone in this room. She's a best-selling author, educator, artist, an abolitionist from Los Angeles. She's been featured as an artist at the Broad, the Geffen, Contemporary at MoCA, Frieze LA, the Hammer Museum, a host of theaters, galleries. She's won awards for her art and, more importantly, her social activism. In 2020, she launched a one-of-a-kind online MFA program at Prescott College, and she's one of the creators of the Crenshaw Dairy Mart, which has had a wonderful impact in our community, and the Center for Art and Abolition. And we also welcome Michelle Mitchell. I'm not even sure why they let me stand up here.
Because you're a badass, too. You know it.
who works at the vibrant intersection of media, racial justice, social impact, law, and policy, amplifying a diverse, underrepresented voices and creating partnerships that elevate and nourish communities of color. She's an artist, an attorney, a social change seeker, and a storyteller, and all of us are here. In 2019, she was tapped to launch Meta's initiative focusing on achieving equity in media representation and building deeper support for diverse, underrepresented creators, media partners, and audiences on Meta's platforms. Today, she leads these programs and a marquee of diverse content investments of Meta, including a $50 million investment in Black creators, We the Culture, and Dale 2. Thank you. You're the best. Instagram's first created program that champions, celebrates, and elevates visionary Latinx and Hispanic creators. I know that I don't need to, even these small introductions are kind of mind-blowing, and we are thrilled to thank you all for being here. There's a vibrant discussion ahead, and should there be any extra time, we'll open it up for question and answers, but I can't guarantee anything. So enjoy, thank you. And
Wow, this is such an honor and a privilege and a joy. The introduction was so insane. This is a dream come true. I think when we envisioned this whole journey, starting with the opening event, opening ceremony, which I'm so grateful a number of you were here for, and we're growing together in this journey. That was wild because I was upstairs preparing for the performance and missed all the time of convening and communing and laughter and joy and hugs that you all had. And so today I'm hoping to catch up on a little bit of that. These beings just fascinate me. I'm someone who is invested in self-expression, in community, in spirit, in self-actualization, in liberty as an active force, in God as an active force of love. And you all hold pillars in unique spaces that inspire me, that motivate me, that provoke me, that stimulate me, that inspire the curiosity in me. And so I'm very, very excited to have this conversation. I have a bunch of questions, like I was doing homework. But I mentioned this would be a conversation, and so let's dive in, shall we? But before we do, let's just take a deep breath and just ease into this moment. You ready? 1, 2, 3, breathe in. Life-affirming, life-affirming, breathe out. Thank you for being here. Let's dive in, shall we? In no particular order, what do you believe to be the purpose of art and the role of the artist in our world today?
Keep it light. That's gonna happen.
Just hear Moon's voice.
We're just entering into the spaceship. This is just the first.
Beam me up.
I can start. Thank you. I'm still beaming from the opening ceremony. I literally jaw dropped and also couldn't stop being inside of it for many, many days after, because I texted you a bunch. So thank you for your offering and this kind of visual portal and ceremony that we're in right now. Deep appreciation. And y'all, just magic. We're just gonna sit up here and just,
Admire each other.
yeah, gas each other up the whole night. But I'll start with this question that I think is an important one, and it's one I think about quite a bit. You know, for most people kind of know me as the founder of Black Lives Matter, one of the founders, and not necessarily as an artist, but I always try to challenge people and say it's artists who created Black Lives Matter. And so for me, the role of the artist is about imagining a new world and building the pathway to that world. There's a reason why we perpetually quote James Baldwin.
Especially now.
Exactly. There's a reason why Audre Lorde is someone, you know, who we hold her books. There's all these artists and their work that, for me, in my lifetime, have paved this journey, this road, this path towards visioning and imagining new worlds. I think about Octavia Butler a lot. The first times that I read her book, and I was like, oh my goodness, someone else is thinking like this. And these ideas are possible. So the artist makes, I think, what feels impossible possible, and also creates these visual, spatial, emotional representations around what we need to challenge, but also what we need to see, what we need to vision.
Sounds good.
I'd say that artists, regardless of their mode or medium for creation, have a responsibility. But I think that there's joy in that, and there's freedom in that, and whether it's just reminding us that we're alive, like sometimes you see a piece of art and it takes you somewhere else. It reminds you of a place you've been or a place you want to go. I think just grounding us in our humanity is a worthy cause. So there's that. And then there's the social change element, right? I think about the role of the artist in transporting us into, as you're talking about like world buildings, what would it look like for us to live in a world that had less of this and more of that? I think artists have a unique opportunity to show us the way towards that and have us to ask questions that push us in the direction and say if the universe, the arc of the universe could be bent, artists have an opportunity to bend it.
Yeah, I guess, you know, the way I always come at it, and I think part of that is being a child of an artist who worked with, again, a lot of really painful images and things like that. And for me, observing that as a child growing up, really got to see how this was a means for my mother to deal with what she was being confronted with. And I think that's, I mean, it's terribly selfish, but I make art because I feel like it's caving in on me and that's the only way I can dig my way out. And as much as I love to think that it has a social impact,
Which it does. It does.
but it really just comes from this really selfish sense of survival. And so, you know, it's nice that it can, and I see examples here and throughout this room of artists that, you know, do achieve that. But for me, it's hard to even think in terms of that second step because it's always about, and so at any rate, that's my backwards approach to it. But it all comes down to healing, and whether it's starting to healing with the self and then hoping that that somehow permeates and kind of goes out and affects others, and that's the good news.
The goodness. I think, you know, you just talked about something that is sincere and also speaks to a sincere process. You know, and I really appreciate that. Because so many people can be so outward leaning in the creative process that it dilutes and it takes away from that. And so that's a gem. I guess I'll go to this next question because it kind of ties into the last one. How do we make inspiration and imagination accessible to all as a tool for personal and collective liberation? Because we find that sometimes these things, these provocations, these inspiration can be inaccessible, can be behind sort of an elite wall. And so how do we make dreaming, imagination active and accessible? Especially in a climate where a lot of people are just trying to survive.
I think one step is just to get it outside of traditional institutions and things like that, and doing things out and about that are, it's just publicly accessible. I mean, things like you're doing at the Dairy Mart and other things where it's just really out there for anyone walking down the street. And so that's one step. I'm not sure if that's really what you're talking about, but you know, we get so caught up in, well, just, you know, the art market is such a thing, and you know, we get so caught up in that, and it's just really nice to see when it can kind of, you know, exist out there, and how it can have such a totally different place, such a totally different role outside of these institutions. And I think, you know, it's great that now institutions recognize that, and they're starting to try to open their doors to people without charging, you know, $25 to get in or $30 or whatever, but also just understanding that they have to kind of expand and get out into communities and, you know, be beyond their own walls. So that's one way of thinking of it, but I know other people may have another take on that.
I think that art is everywhere, and sometimes the thing that keeps us away from it is the things that we learn in terms of, like, you stay in this box, you follow this path, you go in this direction. And perhaps there's something that can be done from an educational standpoint, including like arts education and continuing to make that accessible. So that's one take. I'd say the second take in terms of accessibility, obviously, I think if we were having this conversation 100 years ago, we wouldn't have these little things called phones that were portals into other worlds where you can see film, you can, you know, connect with people that live very differently than you, that are from different cultures, that speak different languages, have different music. I think there is something about connecting and potentially digital connection that democratizes access both to the creation of art, including digital art, right? But also the consumption.
Really good answers. Okay, we're gonna keep this trend going, because I'm liking it. What were some moments of clarity that helped direct your personal path, whether it be your personal walk or your career? What are some moments of deep clarity that help center you?
I definitely want to hear you answer this question.
Okay.
Jump on it.
You know, one of the moments of deep clarity for me came as a dare. Someone asked me about that earlier tonight. So music for me kind of started as a dare. And I had auditioned for choirs before, and I was told my voice sucked. One of the ones was in college. I hope there's... Anyway, peace and love to them, peace and love to them. I remember there were 4 students and the choir director, and I opened my mouth and I sang, I think it was, what's that Grace, something Grace song, it's a Christian song. Amazing Grace. Woo! I figured you can't fuck up Amazing Grace, right? So I said, okay, let me try Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace today is my D. I said, oh, if I give you Amazing Grace, you see Jesus at least in me, right? So I gave it all my all. And then they looked at me, all 4 of them. Hey, you people. And then the director all shook their heads. I said, wow, there is no grace here. Anyway, so I ended up showing up for choir practice, and eventually they forgot that they didn't want me in the choir, and then I was part of the choir. But anyway, that's a whole other story. But fast forward years later, somebody met me and said, oh my gosh, your voice, your speaking voice sounds like that of a singer. And I said, really? I said, why don't you sing? And I said, well, I've been told I can't sing anyone's song well, and I figure I can't sing it as well as them, so I probably shouldn't be singing. I said, well, why don't you write your own song? So then it was a cold winter night in New York City, and I had a long train ride. So I was on the train ride going, and this person was the lead hyena, playing the role of the lead hyena in The Lion King. And so I would spend the next, I think, 3 months going to his dressing room in the building of The Lion King in Manhattan to have him play the guitar to the songs that I was writing. And that's how my music began. And then months later, my grandmother's birthday and passing and all those things. So I spent more time in Ghana, and then my career happened. But that was a moment of clarity. It came as a dare, but it was a moment of, you've heard for so long that you can't exist in this dimension, but someone dares you to step into it in the authenticity of who you are, in the truth of your own calibration and in your own frequency. And that you can make excuses for, or you could meet. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, challenge accepted. So that was a deep moment of clarity. Also, when I chose to follow the path of being a musician, and my mom found out about it, and it led to her essentially disowning me for a number of years. That was a very clear thought. That was a very clear choice. And that was a moment of clarity. I think I've had very deep moments where I've had to make a choice about who I was going to allow myself to be, even understanding that I came from a background that was very Christian, and I was expected to become a doctor, and I was on that path. And it was a big divergence, I guess, in a way. But those moments of clarity really, yeah.
Maybe many of us have those sort of fuck you moments of clarity.
A deep fuck you.
Where, and I like to think of it as divine failure. Because in some ways, someone's putting a hand in there and saying, you were not meant to wait tables. And I was told that the first day I tried to. And all these other things I tried to do. And, it just came down to, I'm just not good at doing anything but this. and hence, I followed that path. But, sometimes we were really resistant to what we need to do. We're resistant to our calling sometimes. So we got to let loose. And be thankful for those people, like you said, that, shut those doors in your faces, because you just found a more magical way around that door, and you found a way of making something that they couldn't even begin to imagine. So we can be
own
thankful.
Amazing grace. You know what I'm saying? Thank you.
Yeah, no, we have to be thankful for those people that have, put those blockades up, because otherwise we wouldn't have found another way. So, maybe.
Also,
Maybe we can.
Yeah, maybe also a fuck you, but yeah. Thank you and fuck you. Okay. No, peace and love to
I love this, and I'm so glad that you answered it. It's really beautiful. I think moments of clarity for me have definitely been, so I grew up dancing, so that was like my art form, and my great-grandmother, I remember her telling me, because I would do little performances for her, and she's like, we're gonna get you in dance classes, and that was like her contribution, and I'm so grateful, because she introduced me to a world of using my body in a way that was deeply healing for me. And then the dance world's really fucked up. So for a young Black girl, it was also this is actually not what I want to be doing. And then I came across a performance artist named Narcissister. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's what I want to be doing. I want to do weird shit. I want to still use this training that I had, but I don't have to do the thing that the studio told me I have to do. I don't have to be at a ballet bar. I don't have to do it like this. And that was really powerful to witness somebody else who also had a dance background do this completely other thing. And it was just so inspiring. I was like, ooh, that's okay. Like if I can, what other things can I do? It just kind of like led me on that kind of path. But I also grew up with a bunch of artists. My brothers were graffiti artists at the height of graph art and hip hop. And so I witnessed these young little black boys like graffitiing and our neighborhood and making beautiful pieces and then being criminalized for it. And, I think about that a lot, how the graffiti world like shaped me. And I remember like trying to graffiti like on my, paper books like my brothers, and just seeing their work be so beautiful and the colors they use, and then see the literal war on taggers. There was a full-on war on young boys who, if we think about the use of like writing on walls, we've been doing that for thousands and thousands of years. The writing on walls is just literally a part of our lineage, and it got criminalized. And so I think growing up in an environment of like witnessing different kind of art was very important for me. And also watching certain kinds of art be criminalized was also really important for me. And I can't divorce sort of the studio and the ballet bar and then my brother's beautiful pieces on, neighborhoods, on the neighborhoods that I grew up in, and watching me be praised at the ballet bar and them be demonized. Like that intersection really shaped my work, like, and how I view my work.
Thank you for sharing that. I think we all have sort of, there's like an interwoven tapestry here that's happening, because I was in 2 choirs. Sorry.
Amen.
I can harmonize. No. I was in 2 choirs. I was dancing. I was doing all the things, and it was all part of the Black church. And so my father was also a professional musician. He was in the United States Air Force Band, so classical music. But he grew up, and the music that we had at home was like gospel and Motown. So it's gospel, Motown, and then it's classical. And I'm in church 5 days a week. And I grew up in Washington, D.C., where the like company that everyone works for is the federal government. So when you're thinking about like, okay, what do I choose to do in the world? It's like, I want to change the world and maybe be a congresswoman or a senator. And so I became a lawyer. I worked for the people in all of the branches of government, did it really well. And I used to walk into these spaces that looked a lot like the walls, and I look a lot like me. And it was almost like a invisible push in some way that like this is not necessarily where you should be. So like the statistics for young Black women at law firms is that most leave by year 4.5, 75% leave by 4.5. And I can tell you all the experiences that I had in 2007, 2008, sleeping under my desk, trying not to get fired, trying to actually do work that mattered in the world and not feeling like I even mattered in the world. And doing that for years, some parts of yourself die, and you have to revive them, and then you have to believe that there's something possible for yourself that's different than the life that you have. Let's breathe in. And so I had an opportunity to go across the country. I'd gotten an email from Meta that said, hey, what if you were to work with us? And I continued this life as an attorney inside of a big company, and did a lot of things to make the world better. Certainly, I can't even talk about the things. But I certainly was like physically and emotionally and like mentally dying. Yeah. And I remembered kind of where I come from, music, art, like fashion, like things that actually made me feel alive, but also ostracize yourself in spaces, again, that look more like the walls when you look more like this, red lips, red heels and all. And I had a moment where I was like, I'm gonna make a change. And so I literally, probably from the emergency room with the EKGs on my chest, decided, and that was a huge moment of clarity. It was like, wow, this is killing me. And I'm gonna do something different. And then what happened next was like a couple of years of specific actions that needed to happen and moments along the way that were clarifying that I was, on the right path, right? And then moments that said, yes, you're doing it. And then other moments where people were like, thank you, right? So I'd say like from the choir to like these, moments of kind of seeing challenging things, whether it's, and differences that you see, and you say, okay, yeah, I still want to make the world a better place. Seeing Ava DuVernay's 13th showed me that like hearts and minds and media could be leveraged to actually do the same thing that I thought I was going to do, as a congresswoman or a senator from Washington. I can do that from Los Angeles. Yeah.
Thank you. As we were kind of responding to that, I was thinking of this, and I know you've all made some very bold decisions in, your careers and your personal lives. And I was just curious, how do you navigate and negotiate risk when you feel a deep calling and conviction to show up in a certain way, or to share a certain message, or to hold a certain space? Before you go out there and activate that dream or that vision that there will be possibly repercussions or pushback for. How do you prepare yourself? How do you support yourself in spirit and body and in mind? And what are some of the tools that you use to help navigate that space?
Such a good question.
Deep breaths.
I'm waiting to hear your guys' suggestions because I'm struggling still to find out, how to get out the door sometimes. But yeah, how do you? Should we turn this back on you?
I mean, I guess I could. I've practiced saying "fuck you" very, very well. It just flows off the tongue. And sometimes I have to say it to myself to get out of my own way, because that voice says, they're going to push back. It's not going to happen. There's no space for you. These people don't want you. And it's like, fuck you. We're going in, and we're going in boldly, because we understand the larger vision. And so we're being compelled by that larger devotion because we understand the impact of what we're going for or advocating for. And so then the end result becomes the motivation, becomes the foundation for that audacity, right? And then I take the risk, understanding that even if it doesn't pay off in the way that I think it should, at the very least, I've exercised a certain muscle that allows me to be far more audacious when the next conviction comes up.
That's right.
Or to even develop further roots in an existing conviction, to become bolder. And so I understand that risk is a necessary part of this. It offers friction. It allows me to clarify within myself the why. Because if it was easy, then I would kind of just prance around. But really being able to own the potential consequence of my action, even if it's 20% bad and 80% good, negotiating that also, or 50-50. Because we all judge that ourselves, right? If something is worth it or not, and whether the impact is worth it or not. Sometimes we try to do something that's good for humanity, but actually isn't. It's self-serving. And so all of that kind of in the mix of it all.
I love that, sort of embracing the audacity. And you were asking me earlier about Topsy. And, I think that's something that I look towards my daughter sometimes, because she is just like so hard-hitting. And I said, I guess I could be as brave as her. And so I think maybe that's probably why I was starting looking into sort of this, mischievous character written by, this white woman in the South. But this idea of really owning that badness and owning, I love basically, that she was made bad, and she was just going to embrace it and just take it to the hilt, you know. And so it's something I think I kind of turn to her for inspiration sometimes in terms of trying to teach myself to not allow myself to be kowtowed or told that I can't do things. But I let that happen a lot. And mostly by myself, right? I mean, I think that's the dangerous voice in all of this.
The loudest one.
Yeah, so I'm appreciating you voicing that as exercising a muscle. I think that's a really lovely way to think of it as, whether it comes to fruition or whether it does backfire on you, that you somehow learn a lesson and grow through that. And I think that's a really lovely way of approaching that. So thank you.
If you need a reminder, you have my number. I'll say it really loud over and over and over again.
I'm feeling sheepish today. I better call JoJo Abbott.
I got you.
Well, I was being sheepish about being here tonight.
And we made it happen. Yes!
Can you repeat the question again?
How do you negotiate and navigate that space of risk when you're looking to be expressive with a sense of conviction around something that you know needs to happen? How do you negotiate that space of risk? And how do you decide what's worth it and what's not? And how do you clarify that within yourself? What are your tools?
For me, it's evolved. I don't know if I thought about it before. I think I just did. And I think with age, I've become more strategic. I don't know if it's always like the most impactful, but what I'll say is in my younger days, I was like, I feel this thing, I'm doing it. Nothing's gonna stop me. No one will, and it made things happen. But I don't think I often thought about the impact on myself or how to protect myself. I don't think that Black women are taught to protect ourselves. So risk didn't mean much to me because I wasn't taught to think about risks. It was do this thing because it's important to the world, so make it happen. If you believe it, make it happen. And so it's actually it's such an interesting thing because it's living in a white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalist structure. The way we have to think about risk is very different. And now that I've learned a lot and have experienced a lot around lack of protection, I'm in this place where I'm trying to figure out how do I do that you're saying? I think that's why I was ask it again, because I'm in a place where I'm not gonna do what I used to do. That's not safe. And I have an 8-year-old. But I don't know what the next, I don't know I'm in the evolution right now. I'm in an evolution. And I'm very curious about this question because, especially for Black women, as we watched Ariane Simone, who's being sued by the federal government for her venture fund for Black women, it's being called racist, right? Or we watch Claudine Gay be ousted by the right. The most vulnerable of us end up, as in Black women, end up often taking the biggest risk and then getting the least protected. And so I'm in this question, and I don't have any answers yet, but I'm very interested in the question around protection and risk specifically for Black women. What is it?
And care, self-care,
Yes.
communal care.
Yes.
As you were talking, I was just thinking about how many movements have not been started because someone was cautious or counted the risk. So I have to say thank you for you know, standing in the gap and pushing things forward, you know, despite the risk to yourself, right? I would say that I was born carefree and cautious. Again, Washington, D.C., preparing for the Senate. You know, you think about everything. And then I became a lawyer, and one of the things that you could have hired me to do as a big company is to say, hey, come do a risk assessment of this deal. So I literally did risk profiles. And I have to say that we could talk about risk for a second, because I think sometimes you actually sit down and you look at all the different categories of risk, the front end, the back end, the angles on the side, what are the variables, and you count the cost of decision, like making a decision, but also not making a decision has a cost too. And sometimes you still do something that's risky or something that's bold despite the potential risk, because the risk is worth the reward. So I think like risk analysis is something that I do almost instantly. And see, the second thing when making a personal decision for myself around like whether do I move into the creative fields or do I stay in law where I was? And I spoke to a friend who said, I think your biggest risk is not taking a risk. And I was like, oh. Then I heard someone else say it another time. I was like, oh, you didn't make that up. But it really resonated with me, and perhaps it'll resonate with some of you who are thinking about risks in your life, because sometimes standing still, like if you swim out in the ocean and you just decide that you're going to stand still, you're going to drown, right? So like standing still is a mistake sometimes, and being frozen with fear such that you're not going to take a risk that could put you in the right, you know, current, is like maybe what you should do after thinking about it. But don't think too long.
You might drown. I love that. We have some seats in the front. Please come in. Yes, please feel free to come.
There's space
Thank
at
you
the
so
altar.
much for sharing all of this. This is so amazing. I asked that question because I was kind of thinking about how we, again, this thing of like clarity and determining how we create and how we occupy the world. And this is not just restricted to artists, right? Everyone is creative in the experience of their own lives, and the curation and co-creation of their own lives. And so this applies to all of us. And I hope that all of these explorations can inform whatever it is that we all do and we all are. But yeah, I asked that to kind of lead into what is, I like to say, the motherboard, right? The reference point for our decision making and our creative process, or how we show up every minute of every day, including the 9 to 5 hours, right? What is that reference point? What is the filter? How to engage spirit versus mind versus soul versus body, the somatics of it all. What technologies inside and outside are we using to measure this risk, to assess the reward or the impact? Are we relying on community? Are we relying on validation? Are we relying on trust and faith within? Are we relying on divine inspiration, divine guidance? Are we patient enough to wait on divine guidance? Yeah, how do you access your own spiritual center in that process, or your own mental center or somatic center? Where do you pull from? And what are some of the values that are born out of that?
Such a big question and a beautiful question. I think the thing that comes to me is just like world citizenship and community. And then also when you think about setting your energy, whether it's your energy or an organization that you're part of in a particular direction. It's who's it for and what's the intention behind it. Like, who does this serve? Who does this benefit? So that's sort of like it's an internal and an external thing. I get a lot of energy from people. I feel also like I get instructions from within. It's like ideas just come, and sometimes the idea comes from within. Maybe it's intuition, which is a part of the divine feminine, right? It's intuition that you listen to, which sometimes tells you the future. And I'm not talking about like, I see the future. I'm talking about like, I think we should be over there by next year. And people are like, why would anyone go over there? And you're like, no, I think over there is where we should go, and I think we should go with these people. And then somehow you're over there with those people, and someone comes to pick you up exactly on time. And it's that intuition that sort of like met with confirmation that you were on the right track, and then it becomes strategy. So now I'm a strategist, right? And I think I pull that from people, from like energetically from people, from listening, from being in the space, like as head of culture at my organization. It's like I have to be outside sometimes to hear what people are talking about and what people are needing. And then I think about what I'm doing, and the question is like, is this filling a need for someone? So now we're back to who's it for and why. Yeah. So it's circular.
Cyclical, that we kind of go through seasons in a certain sort of way, and often I find myself being really overwhelmed by all that's around, and I find it really hard to like find inspiration. I find really hard to kind of find a space to be quiet with myself and be able to listen to whatever is out there that's trying to talk to me, or hopefully it's trying to talk to me. And so there's periods where it's frankly, and I kind of feel like I'm in it right now, a very sort of hibernative state. I'm checking in on my tortoise who's hibernating, and I'm kind of feeling like, yeah, we got a lot common right now. We need to just like withdraw, like go back under the covers. And, it seems like, in terms of when ideas start to hit me, a lot of times it's through music, just listening to stuff, because I think it's a time where you're able to allow everything else to fall away and to kind of become in a space that's not the here and now, or whatever other things help induce that, but music really helps me with that. But I'm finding, I think the older we get and the more we got going on, the harder it is to find that time. I don't know if you all are experiencing similar sort of overwhelming moments, but it can be a challenge sometimes. Yeah.
I think it's in the same way we struggle sometimes to make the time to meditate or to pray or to connect with what we call nature, as if it's external or outside of us. But it kind of makes me think of that. I can ask you another question.
No, I like this one.
She's
I'm just
brewing on
thinking,
it.
yeah.
I love it.
Well, the moment you asked this question, like the first thing I thought about was abolition. It is like my value set, and lots of people, when they hear the word abolition, they obviously think of like abolishing something, getting rid of it, and for me, abolition is actually about imagining. It's about imagining something new, and so for me, my practice, my art practice, is deeply rooted in my abolitionist practice. When you were talking, I was thinking a lot about Harriet Tubman and how she was, there's sort of like the mythical Harriet Tubman, and then there's like the historical Harriet Tubman. And I've done a lot of studying of Harriet, like a lot of studying. And it's because when I was a small child and I was reading about the enslavement of Africans, and I started to, I was very curious about slavery doesn't exist anymore, so what happened? Like, who helped, change this thing? And there's all these stories of Harriet she had narcolepsy because she was hit upside the head with a metal iron in a shop by her owner, by her master. But this narcolepsy turned into her having visions. So when she would, the story is that she would free people, and she never lost a passenger, but she would also fall asleep, like in the middle of the forest, freeing people, and everybody would be freaking out. And they'd be like, what? And then she'd wake up, and she'd be like, I had a vision, we're going a different direction. And she never lost a passenger. Wow. And so, she is such a study for me around possibility and listening. She couldn't read. And deep listening to your gut and spirit and understanding your value set outside of this system. And so she is hands down the huge inspiration for me. And she's one of the most powerful abolitionists, but she's who I kind of hold when I'm thinking about the work that I'm doing and listening to the visions.
Yeah, I think it's really important when you have, you're in a position where you're impacting so many lives that you have some other reference point outside of just your mind, especially the new mind, right? I have to be able to trust you with more than your mood and your mind, right? Ooh, what time is it? Because I know. Child. Did we say Q&A? Is Q&A actually a hope and a prayer? Are the people actually hopeful for a Q&A? Are we hopeful for a Q&A? Oh. Yes, that was at least 20 yeses. That's a lot. Meanwhile, I have 25 million more questions. Okay, let's do the last one. And then the rest will get together and have lunch and we'll talk forever.
Yes, please.
Okay. Oh my gosh, this is so difficult. Okay, I like this one a lot because I think about this a lot. How do we foster greater global ties? What values can we share in that space? Imagining a global nation. I believe this also ties into sort of this mother spirit, right? This, the mother that looks to bring the children together. And that also ties into the divine feminine principle of unity, of harmony, of community. How do we use this time? Free Palestine. Free all of us, right? Free all the people within and without. Free us from hatred. Free us from fear. Lead us into love. Because that's the true essence of who we are. Free all of us. How do we galvanize these times to foster connection rather than division? How do we leave this room empowered not to only dream, but to activate in our own unique corners, change and possibility? How do we make this a global shift? How do we build new nations that this is our nation and our foundational principle is love? And then that nation grows and grows and grows. It's a physical nation, it's a metaphysical nation. We connect, we communicate with words, but also in spirit. How do we share love across oceans, which we're already doing? How do we amplify and intensify? How do we become masters of this real, Tai Chi type shit? Yeah.
I have a lot of thoughts about this.
Go for it.
It's specifically to US born people because we have, we're such navel gazers. And so I'll just say, I'll give some instructions. This is Patrisse Cullors, the community organizer, coming out of me. Please don't only read Western media. It is a trap. It's a big trap, and there is so much other media out there from other people's countries. I was in Amsterdam for a week and like was so grateful I didn't get, like I wasn't bombarded by Western media, and I was learning about the farmers in France. And when I came back, nobody was talking about it, but everybody was talking about it in Europe. And I was like, wow, like we really, but everybody was talking about the States and Europe as well, because this place impacts the world. And because we have such little, what is the word? Just navel gazing. We have a hard time seeing past ourselves in this country. So just a big push for, people who are born here, who've kind of spent their whole life here. I'm talking to myself too, to look outside of this place. I promise it's better on the other side. And so I think that's number one. Number two, don't take social media so seriously. Our algorithms really make it narrow. We may think we're seeing everything, we are not. Meet each other, sit with each other, talk to each other, be in community in the flesh.
Yes.
I feel like our next evolution is actually like shedding our relationship and our addiction to social media and spending time together. And I truly understand the utility of social media, and I also understand its danger. And I really like, part of my sermon to audiences is to really take it for a grain of salt, and kind of like get the things you need, but don't take it so seriously. I was just talking to a friend today who, was being badgered by someone on social media, and they just sent it to me, and I'm like, this hurts. Like, how do I respond to this? And I was like, I don't think you do. I think you let that go, and hopefully if you, know this person and can get on a call with them, like, you get offline and you put that to the side. And I've really tried to practice that in the last few years, is just talking to people, like, and sitting with people and not allowing social media algorithms to dictate how I'm in relationship.
And also not letting like immediate perceptions of, oh, this person posted this and I don't agree with this, so I won't connect with them as a whole being. I
Yes.
find that to be such harsh judgment.
Yes.
And there's so many layers to us, and also we evolve in our thoughts and our perspectives. So being open to connecting with people who don't share the same ideologies as us also helps us grow and clarify, and so that is really important to dig deeper as well.
I'd say, like, when I think about, like, the experience that your friend shared with you, the thing that came to me is, like, these are human people having human experiences on a technology platform, right? And so in some ways, I see social media or media in general as both part of the problem and part of the solution. So, prior to sharing that example, I was thinking about, like, if you think about how can you connect with someone globally if you live in Washington, D.C., and Ward 8, that's where I grew up, on an Air Force base. Like, the first time I got on a plane, I was 19, and someone else paid for it, right? So how could I have a global perspective unless it was on television or through media, right? And then I thought about a lot of the stories that I've seen around how sport is uniting people, right? You throw a soccer ball into a field,
right.
put 30 people that speak different languages all together and see them have a great time. And no one's gonna ask anyone any political questions. It's not gonna happen. But sport unites people, whether it's football, basketball, soccer. Music unites people. I was just looking at the Bob Marley documentary, and also the film that was just released, and it was like Bob Marley, Uniting a Nation, Under One Love, wow. And also just looking at all of the artists that came up, Black artists that came up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that went to Europe because their own country didn't accept them, and then became global phenomenons, and then like they're the people that were just, you know, that we all talk about in February, right? But music being a way of bringing people together even during segregation, right? Like if you think about like Little Richard, for example, a huge pioneer in that space. So music, fashion, art, you can go anywhere in this world and see people sort of consuming media and culture from others, and how's it getting there? Social media, television. So all of the things that you said, yes. And also I think as we're thinking about how people can connect, it's also part of the solution if we do it responsibly. And I'm not at work right now, but I actually really believe that. And think that like there is a path, but I do also worry sometimes about the dangers and the things that are negative experiences that people are having, because it's human people having human experiences.
Yeah, thank you. I'm from Ghana, West Africa, so I'm really interested in how we connect as a global nation. That's really been at the center of my work, and so I feel the more we own our cultures and our experiences and we share that openly, the more we can connect with each other and foster those spaces of community, regardless of what our beliefs and our values may be. I think sometimes we look for perhaps too much similarity where we're not challenged to grow.
That's right.
And so breaking outside of our silos, I think, is really important. To be in dialogue, especially as people creating and crafting worlds, liberated worlds. So we're going to take a few questions just real quick before we wrap up. Does anyone have a question?
Yes. I want to know what's next for each of you.
Wow.
Oh, you want to know what's next for each of
I
them?
want to know too.
No pressure.
Who's going first?
I think we got a list of what's next for you, but also you can share what's next for you.
You heard all that.
I mean, what's next for me is continuing this journey with all of you and then having our closing ceremony, but also continuing this learning and this community building.
Well, we're really excited to see the kind of progress of your opera coming together.
Same.
Oh, yes, me too. And touring the opera, very much looking forward to that. But growing, learning, becoming.
When is the closing ceremony?
March 1st. Yeah.
You heard it here.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'd say for me, I've done a lot of work creating platforms for other creatives to be creative, and that requires me to not do my practice myself because it's very consuming. But what's next for me is breaking into getting back to actually creating what I'd like to create. So I'm working on screenplays. I have some ideas for fashion. I have a huge birthday this year, 40. Yay! Thank you. So I'm thinking about like a creative festival to celebrate my birthday. Yeah.
That was my birthday last year. It's very nice. What's next for me? I have a show up at the Fowler right now. It's up till June 2nd, so folks should check it out. Thank you. Well, apparently one of the galleries are closed right now, so don't check it out right now. Check the website, but it's on the Orisha, and it's the Fowler has put out 100 of the Orisha objects, and I'm one of the contemporary artists for the show. So very, very special show that's up right now, and very, very grateful for it. I have my first solo show in June at Charlie James Gallery. I'm very excited about that. And, Charlie James Gallery in Chinatown. And I am just like hanging out with my kid, growing a human being. Yep. I'm dreaming about leaving LA like I do every year. Every year I'm like, one day, I'm born and raised Los Angeles. I've never left. So I'm due for a I'm due for like a get out of here and do something else. And every couple months I have a new idea of what country. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that, I don't know. So maybe you'll see me on the other side soon. But yeah, I think a lot of like dreaming, doing, loving, and caring.
We'll take one last question, and then okay, maybe one more for that. Yes.
Will you stand, love? Sorry, I can't.
Divine, sacred, and love are three really charged symbolic words that you all have used throughout this conversation. So either or and define, one, all, and are there any other words that carry that resonance?
She did that with the question.
Yes. For mine, as you're saying, in my being, I think divine, sacred, and love are one and the same. Love is sacred. Love is divine. To be in our divinity, we express love. We acknowledge our sacredness and that of others and all living things. To be aware of the sacredness in all things, we must love it, we must honor it. So for me, it feels very much like the same, multiple heads of the same being. Yeah, what about you?
Another word.
Right, another word. The other word almost feels like a breath rather than a word, to me at least. But like a full, satisfying, affirming breath, yeah.
The word sacred for me, I think does sort of connote like special, right? But the one thing that as we're closing out, I'd say is that sacred can also be accessible. And so it's the accessibility of love and divinity that I think makes it what it is.
Yes, sacred doesn't just mean that the thing is inaccessible, exclusive. Sacred can be, and actually in many ways should be, accessible and honored and communed with. Yeah.
Quotidian. Sacred it could be just every day. It's something that we have access to, everyone, every day. But it doesn't need to be.
As JOJO Abot would say, power to the God within.
Power to the God within. Power to the God within. I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Please come back anytime with your family, with your friends. This is our home for the next number of weeks, and I love you infinitely. Be the change we want to see. Power to the God within.
Thank you all for joining us. Come back, please, and make sure to see the exhibition